Hello, I'm Jeff Peterson, lifetime resident of Vinyl Haven, Maine, and I've been fishing my whole life, and that's pretty much all I've done is be a lobsterman.
Ooh, that's the wrong Peterson. Let's try again, shall we? And let's talk about Jordan Peterson and the lobster hierarchy. Rule 1 of Dr. Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life is to stand up straight with your shoulders back. Now, I'm a bit of a natural sloucher. I'm a bit scruffy and a bit sloppy. And when I was younger, I used to compare myself to Boris Johnson. Kind of. I'm not as rotund as him, yet anyway. I've got brown hair and not blonde hair. And I'm working class, not upper class. And I lack his verbal dexterity, as you're going to find out in these videos. But we have both rugby tackle Japanese school kids, and that has got to count for something. When I was a teenager, my mum used to tell me to stand up straight. But it's not something that I carry through in my life too much. As I said, I'm a natural sloucher. So I've always thought to myself, after a social event or an interview, that I really should have stood up straighter. I should have given a better version of myself. But it always occurred to me too late. And like a lot of people, I see these ideas of Jordan Peterson's as being self-evident, basic, common knowledge. And yet I haven't actually learnt these things and instilled them deep within myself like I should have done. And that's why a lot of people are coming to this book and thinking to themselves that there's a lot to learn and a lot to reinstill or instill inside themselves for the first time. And it's revolutionising their lives. And part of this is not just the truism of the idea itself, but it's the complex ideas and explanations that come with them. And an example of this is how standing up straight with your shoulders back relates to lobsters. So let's find out.
So let's get on to the lobsters.
But what about the thing about, fighting and the lobster? Tell us about the lobster.
So these creatures engage in dominance disputes. And I think dominance is the right way to think about it, because lobsters aren't very empathic and they're not very social. And so it really is the toughest lobster that wins. And what's so cool about the lobster is that when a lobster wins, he flexes and gets bigger, so he looks bigger.
Okay, my big problem with the lobsters is that it's scientifically bollocks.
Well, it looks like we're going to science the hell out of this one, aren't we? The taller, more open stance of the victorious lobster is a result of that very victory. On defeating its opponent, serotonin floods through the body of the winner, whereas for the loser, serotonin drains out and it becomes smaller and more closed. This is a result of the serotonin system, which is designed to fill the body with confidence on success. Lobsters are incredibly old, and they diverged from us, or we diverged from them rather, millions of years ago, but the serotonin system works on the same principles for both of us. And in fact, the serotonin system is even older than animals. It goes back to plants and trees and maybe beyond that. To understand how this works, we need to understand the serotonin system. Now, serotonin, otherwise known as 5-hydroxytryptamine, is a monoamine neurotransmitter which is linked to the perception of resources and resource security. 90% of our body's serotonin is secreted from the gastrointestinal tract in the tummy, with the rest of it coming from platelets, the central nervous system and the brainstem. Serotonin is not linked to aggression. That's more likely to be testosterone or other hormones and chemicals in the body. Serotonin is linked to confidence and dominance, and these are two completely different things. And in fact, it may also be linked to patience, hence the perception of resource availability. Studies of mice and how long they can wait for food rewards have shown that mice with higher serotonin levels are more likely to be patient. Serotonin levels vary from individual to individual, and these are based on 3 separate factors. The first factor is genetics. This gives us a base level of what our serotonin should be. The second one is environmental factors. For example, positive ones may increase our serotonin levels, whereas negative ones, like abuse, will reduce them. The third factor is how we react to losses and victories and anything else within our lives. How we react could mean that our serotonin levels rise slower when we do well, or maybe fall faster when we don't do so well. This is why standing up straight with your shoulders back is so important. It allows you to, if not directly flood your system with serotonin, but to reduce the amount you lose when you don't do so well. Or, and perhaps even more importantly, it adjusts the perception other people have of you when it comes to your confidence levels. And this is vitally important because in our lives, all of these things, our strengths, our weaknesses, our personalities, our serotonin levels, they combine to form hierarchies.
Most human hierarchies, as I already pointed out, are hierarchies of competence, not power.
Okay, so tell
That's
me,
why we don't live in a patriarchal tyranny. And so if you want to be a successful man, then you should be competent. The thing that rises to the top of any given pyramid is the same thing that can dominate all pyramids. It isn't good enough to be the best at a dominance hierarchy. What you want to be is the best at the set of all possible dominance hierarchies. Right. And that's the thing that's gold at the top of the pyramid, and that's the eye. That's what the Egyptians figured out. And what does that mean? It means the thing that puts you at the top is attention. Pay attention. Keep your eyes open. It's not the same as thinking. It's not the same thing.
So what he's saying is that a hierarchy is a combination of competences. There is the core skill at hand, let's say playing tennis, plus there is the ability to understand the game, observe the game, see what the trends are, know what your opponent's failures are, find ways of winning. Those who are skilled and have the right personality traits, productivity, observation, ingenuity, will have a better chance of rising to the top of that particular hierarchy. Those who lack even just one of those skills will have a much lower chance of getting to the top. Though if they're high in one skill or a couple of skills, or they're mediocre, they will be able to rise up and down the middle levels, defeating some opponents, not defeating others, being better at something than some people, and so on and so forth. Here's an example. Last year, in 2017, a Japanese friend of mine was texting me excitedly one day because Ed Sheeran had booked a concert in Osaka, and it would be the first time for him to go to Osaka. Now, this is the city where I used to live, and I love it very much, but it never had someone like Ed Sheeran in his pomp turning up while I was there. So this was a great opportunity for her. At the same time, Ed Sheeran had released his latest album. He had got 16 songs in the top 20 of the singles chart based on downloads. This meant he dominated that chart with 80% of all sales. That's quite an amazing achievement and showed total domination of that musical hierarchy in one moment. Now, I think it lasted 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, but in that little moment, he had total dominance. When not corrupted or fixed or bent in some way, a hierarchy naturally forms what is known as the Pareto distribution. The Pareto distribution is seen across the entire world. Some people say it can be seen in the stars, in galaxies, but if we take it down a bit, we can see it in lobsters, we can see it in trees, in terms of how many trees get how much sunlight in a woodland. And we see it in various aspects of humanity. Now, the Pareto distribution is this. Of all the people doing something, let's say producing music like Ed Sheeran on that particular week, so the 100% of people who released albums on that week, of them, 10% will have produced 90% of the music. And that 10% would have sold 90% of the music and would be able to live off the music. Of that 10%, only 10% itself, so 1% overall, would have produced 90% of that. Or in Ed Sheeran's case, 80%, which is close enough. Of course, this means that a very large amount of the productivity and the rewards are going to a very small number of people, but it's based on competency. Ed Sheeran didn't get to 80% of all the sales because he's a god. He got there because that's who the people wanted to listen to, and that's the music that people downloaded that week. And it's the same with any competency. In a competency-based hierarchy, is that it's earned, not forced to be there. But the consequence of this hierarchy is the following. If 10% get 90% of the stuff and do 90% of the stuff, that means conversely that 90% of people are only producing 10% of the music, who may be only getting 10% of the sales or less. And therefore, the vast majority of the 90% get nothing from their efforts. And that leaves a lot of people at the bottom. And some will do better than others, some will produce nothing, some will produce a bit but get absolutely nothing for it, or will be utterly rubbish at it. If I released music, it would be worse than Victoria Beckham's, for example. That's how bad it would be. And so, there's a lot of people at the bottom of a competency hierarchy. And I can understand that some people say, well, that's not fair. But it is fair, because it's based on your competency. And one of the people at the bottom of that competency hierarchy for making music could be the world's best tennis player, could be an excellent carpenter. We can't excel at everything. Some of us will excel at nothing. Some will be mediocre at most things, but a lot of people will have something that they're pretty good at. And they might not get to the top of any of the hierarchies, but they could do okay in some. The thing about hierarchies is that they can't be fixed, as I said. And when I mean fixed the first time, I meant somebody perverts the hierarchy to force someone to the top, like forcing Victoria Beckham up to the top of the music charts when she clearly doesn't deserve it. She got there because her husband's rather attractive to most women. Well, he's some, and not when he speaks. But what I mean in the second time is fixed as in static. It is thus and will always be thus. A hierarchy cannot be static, especially a competency-based one. People have to be able to rise and fall. It's important for this fluidity to be there because it gives people hope and an opportunity to do better, to think smarter. So the Lobster loses its first fight, it says, oh, I just give up and off I go. Or it might say, well, he won that one, but if I do this next time, I could beat him. And that's those other skills coming to bear. The hierarchy will fall apart if the gap grows too wide. So the wealth gap, for example. People don't mind there being wealthy people, especially if they earn it. Ed Sheeran has earned his wealth. If they inherit it, people are not as happy, but they don't mind it if the relative gap is small and if they feel that they can do better, if there's an opportunity for them to do better. And the same goes for freedom. If the dominant people get too tyrannical, the people at the bottom rebel. If we feel there's no chance of making our way up the hierarchy, we rebel. And that hierarchy will fall. No matter how dominant the top dog is, 3 lesser dogs with 2/3 of the strength, or 2/3 of the ability, or 2/3 of ingenuity can topple that top dog. You see it all the time in the animal world. If a male chimp reaches the top of his pack or pride or whatever a bunch of chimps are called and becomes the top dog and chases off all the other males so only he breeds with the females, if he is tyrannical, if he beats on the lesser chimps, they will turn around and rip him to pieces because he has broken the rules of that hierarchy. By the same token, if he gives them a bit of confidence, if he shows them affection and treats them well, then he can maintain his top dog status.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
Even if the top of the hierarchy falls and you don't rise, losing does not have to diminish your standing. if you compete in the right way, with guts and with honour, you will still rise in yourself and in the eyes of those around you. Look at the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae. They lost, all died to a man, but they have been immortalised in history forever. Look at Rocky Balboa in the first Rocky movie. He took Creed to 15 rounds, and he lost, but he won in the eyes of the audience, in the eyes of his wife, in the eyes of his son, and that's what mattered most to him. He gained respect. He became immortalised in Philadelphia because of that fight, for taking such a superior fighter, taking on the top dog in boxing, and taking to 15 rounds in a split decision. We will not get to the top of the hierarchies. Very few people do. As I said before, a few men are at the top of everything, but most men are at the bottom. But what we can do is stand up tall, our back straight, our shoulders back. And as Peterson says in his book, people, including yourself, will start to assume that you are competent and able if you stand up straight with your shoulders back and you project that kind of image. And let's not forget one other thing. We are the descendants of survivors. We are the descendants of those who succeeded, those who overcame diseases, those who overcame war, those who fought to the top of their own little hierarchies. And in fact, before we diverged millions of years ago, we are the descendants of those lobsters who won their battles, who opened their stance with their little claws, and who got the females. Might be a weird thing to think about, but that's the way biology is, and evolution too. Thank you for watching.
The other thing that's so interesting about being alive is that you're all in. No matter what you do, you're all in. This is going to kill you. So I think you might as well play the most magnificent game you can while you're waiting. Because do you have anything better to do? Really? Why not pick the best thing possible that you could do?